children have behavior problems. So, how do you identify that this behavior problem is because of a communication need or is it something else?
You have to ask yourself one question. Is the child doing this because he or she cannot express it any other way? Once his needs are met, like communication, sensory need, or hunger, and he stops the behavior, it was communication, not a misbehavior.
Ma'am, you definitely must have gone through this. So, how did you identify then? How did you deal with that?
I feel a lot of behaviors are the result of inability of communication. I feel that's what I feel. Kids are not able to express themselves and they have a lot of needs, and when their needs are not met, there is a huge gap and they really don't know what to do. That causes frustration, and the frustration causes the behavior. So literally identifying that is extremely important.
So, welcome both of you to the Dolly Show today. And I'm truly, truly grateful that you two are here with us. And lots of crazy things that we're going to discuss. Lots of achievements, lots of mind-blowing things that you two have done. So, yes, we have our professional, who is Shrita Jain. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. And we have our power-packed parent here, who is Priya Ajbani, ma'am. Thanks, both of you, for being here. And lots of new elements and new topics that we'll be discussing. So, ma'am, you are trained in AAC, Awaaz. So, please tell us about that.
So AAC refers to augmentative and alternative communication, which is a set of tools or method that we used by and for people who have difficulties in verbal communication. AAC has actually transformed my learning. So, when many people, including therapists, used to consider speech as the only measure of communication. But through AAC, I've realized that communication is connection, not just words. For many nonverbal children, speech may take some time, but that does not mean that they don't think, feel, or understand. They have their voice too. So AAC became their voice even before speech could. And when a child finally feels that she is heard, then behavior reduces and learning begins.
So now that you have given us in-depth information about AAC, we would really love to know, how does Awaaz work?
Awaaz is accessible in multiple Indian languages like Kannada, Malayalam, Bengali, Marathi, English, Hindi, so that people from different regions can access it beautifully.
Yeah.
You can change how many grids you want on Awaaz. You can put in your voice. You can add words. You can change pictures, make it more relatable. You can actually record some pictures and use it like it's your very own communication device.
So
it's very personalized. It's very customized based on every person's needs. You can change voice. You can change accents. You can change grid number. You can change, there are n number of possibilities with Awaaz. Also, we can do multiple things in Awaaz. We can do storytelling, we can do matching, sequencing, cognitive building, and a lot more.
Oh, wow. That's really amazing to know.
So this is how the application looks like. Okay. And there are multiple categories, multiple words in the application. All of it can be customized based on your needs. So, for example, there are 24 pictures in this setup. It's too overwhelming for a child with special needs to focus on this image because there are distractors as well. So what we do is we can customize based on how much can he or she take. So let's say I want to customize the grid into 4 pictures per screen. I can go up to 117 pictures, starting off with very one single huge picture. So 4 is a good decent size for people to understand. So this is how I go. And it has words, it has pictures, all of it associated. So let's say if I want to communicate saying I want to eat. So the person can click on I. They also give you an auditory feedback so that your auditory stimulation goes in place. I like. To. Then let's say I like to eat. Eat what? Eat, drink. Eat. What do you want to eat? You can ask these questions. They can scroll by themselves. Let's say lunch, dinner. Now they have put up realistic images so that the child can connect to what is roti, what is dal, what is chapati and sambar. We can modify all of this. We can also put your own voice. You can also put your own voice. So this is dal. Let's say I want to eat dal. Dal. And once the sentence is done, I can also share it across over WhatsApp if I want to communicate the same to my mother, for example. So when I click on share and click on WhatsApp, this is how it looks. I like to eat dal. And then I send. So the person who is seeing gets my messages. Also, there's a keyboard attached. So if a person wants to communicate differently using keyboard, a person can just type, I want to eat dal with W-I-T-H with rice. R-I-C-E rice. So it's done.
I like to eat dal with rice.
So that is how you're able to communicate, because many people might not be understanding or might not know spellings of words. But when they see pictures, it's a multi-sensory approach. You have auditory in place, you have visual in place, they give you a feedback. So it's like a multi-sensory approach that they are using.
Wow. This seems like a holistic app that takes care of all the elements.
Yes.
Super. So about the initiative Antar, which is Karishma Mehta and Dr. Mickey Mehta's digital wellness platform. What's your role in that?
So as we all know, Antar is a global digital wellness platform, is a brainchild of Karishma Mehta, who is daughter of Dr. Mickey Mehta, who is also the visionary mentor at Antar. My role at Antar involves designing and facilitating mental wellness program that combines psychology and holistic healing together. We work with corporates, educational institutions, individuals to build resilience and emotional safety. We also work for people on the spectrum holistically with regards to their therapies, with regards to counseling, with regards to OMT, massages, and so on. So basically at Antar, our prime focus isn't numbers in terms of calories, weight, etc. It is constitutional specific, gender specific, age specific, concern specific, and that is our X factor.
Supriya ma'am, our super mom. Ma'am, I would love to know yours and your son's journey.
So, thank you for having me in the show. And I would like to talk about Dave's journey. And I remember Dave as a very communicative, expressive child. He achieved his milestones all in time. But when he was 4.5 years old, he had a very sudden regression. I still remember that day. It was the first week of December in 2010. And a child who was speaking, doing news clippings and playing and, even writing. He regressed just within a span of 3 days. in the sense like I remember he was in nursery that time in an IB school, and he suddenly got very hyperactive, and he had a lot of self-talk. He lost his sleep, and everything happened together in the span of 3 days. So of course that got us very worried. And the first thing you do is, you don't know. At that time I never had that idea what is autism. So it was a shock to the entire family. So the first thing we did was take him to a priest. And you do that, is everything okay? Yeah. Is the child possessed? What happens? Because everything comes into action. And it took us a while to, accept that. And then we took him to Dr. Vibha Krishnamurthy, who is a very known developmental pediatrician from Ummi Child Development Center. And she was the one to diagnose him with autism. And then we were still not satisfied. As parents, we feel like, how has this happened all of a suddenly? Because 4.5 is very late for regression. And then within a span of 3 months, we took him to the Boston Children's Hospital in Boston, US. And there we had a 3-day diagnosis. And they then informed us formally for the diagnosis, and they gave us the diagnosis. And yes, it all began, there, the diagnosis, which was the most difficult part to accept.
This is, I can just understand. Definitely, what you have gone through. But you have come out more powerful, is what I can see for sure. So you have been a cancer survivor. You're an entrepreneur, as well as you have won a pageant. Where do you get all this superpower from?
I think my resilience is my superpower. And the resilience, actually, I would give a lot of credit to Dave's journey, because he has played an extremely important part. Because for me, strength was like a lot of momentum, a lot of action, and doing, and things which have to be seen. But he actually, has shown me that strength is in presence, like showing up, patience. And I think courage is something which is very silent. Before I was, very a person who needed to see very tangible results. But now I understand that the real courage and strength is actually in silence, to keep showing up, each and every day when things around you also get very difficult, whether it is with parenthood, whether is it with entrepreneurship, or generally in life. So that was my biggest teaching from this journey with my son, that, keep showing up each day, because you do not have a choice. With your children, you do not have a choice. And the same principles I have applied in my advocacy, in my entrepreneurship, in my connections with my friends and my family.
Wow. Amazing. Making use of the potential and identifying the potential, and then you have taken and adapted.
Yes.
Awesome. That's amazing. So, ma'am, you have already won the title of Mrs. India Globe Classic. And now you're representing internationally, which is Mrs. Globe Classic. So through all of this, how are you portraying Dev's story?
I'm talking about Dev's story not as a struggle, but a story which is of strength, purpose, and a lot of talent and potential. So whichever platforms I go to, whether it is my podcast, whether it's pageants, whether in all my advocacy work, I talk of children like Dev, their unique strengths and their potentials, because I feel they do not need pity. Empathy is good. So, and they are children and adults with extreme talent, and they are our future artists, our athletes, our leaders, and our workers and entrepreneurs. So I want to portray children and adults with autism in a way that people see their potential and we highlight their success stories in a very big way.
So true, so true. There's no space for pity. There's no space for the sad kind of element that you add on to all of this.
That's right. And I feel that the problem here is the mindset of the people. If we shift the mindset of people, and when we talk about these things a lot in these empowering platforms, it does make a huge difference. Because, we always have professionals who are connected with autism or doctors talking, but, women who are in these platforms, if they start talking about it, I think it's going to shift the whole dynamic.
True that. So, ma'am, you have also taken the Glenn domain approach for Dev. So, if you could tell us about that, what difference has it made?
When Dev was around, 9 years old, we, enrolled him in this program in Philadelphia, which is IAHP, Institute for the Achievement of Human Potential, by the very renowned Glenn Dorman. And in that program, it's a very holistic approach. So basically, we had to pull him out of school and we had to work with Dev with, bits of intelligence, oxygen therapy, a lot of physical program, diet. So it's an integrated program which needed 16 hours a day of work, 365 days a year, no Sundays off. So it's a very rigorous program, but, we have seen great results with that program. So we ran this program for 3 years with Dev. I ran it with him myself with the help of, a few trainers. We used to start at 9 in the morning and we used to finish literally at 9:10 in the night. And we, did this for 3 years, 365 days until and unless, I found one day now I do not have the capacity and I was literally burnt out. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are not for it because they feel that it causes the burnout for parents. But for parents who feel that they can, it's a very individual choice. So this program definitely helped Dev, I think, cognitively, behaviorally, and also with his communication. His communication had really suffered a lot. So what we got out of that was something very beautiful. Today, Dev is one of the finest athletes. Like, he can run 10 kilometers at a stretch. He, runs marathons now. We are, even enrolling him for other, triathlons and all. So it did develop him quite a bit. And the team, for the parents who are interested, the team also comes to India. They have started coming to India twice a year in Delhi. So we've seen a lot of success stories internationally with the Glenn Dorman program, right from the reading program to their math program to their bits of intelligence to their physical program to increasing oxygen with masking, and so it is a good program. It was beneficial for Dev.
Fabulous. Yeah, we do all know all children are different and need to cater to differently. Also, you're a fire safety pioneer and you have your own organization. And in this organization, you employ people on the autism spectrum. Fabulous. That's a big hats off to you. So please tell us about that.
So basically, actually, we employ people with neurodiversity, whether they have autism or intellectual disability or learning disability. But I started this around 4 years ago, and I consciously chose to employ individuals who not only had ADHD and they were high functioning, but I wanted individuals who were not that high functioning because I felt like people who are high functioning, they can somehow manage, and a lot of organizations are there to recruit them. But who will actually work with who are more profound? That's the time I approached my friend, who is with the Jai Vakil Foundation.
Yes.
And I think everybody knows that it's one of the biggest school in Mumbai for special needs. And since last 4 years, we have, recruited and trained 4 individuals with different disabilities. And we have had the Jai Vakil staff come in and sensitize our staff and train our staff. And we have had a program where they keep coming weekly and checking, and making the program to structure, around the needs of the adult. So we've had 2 girls and 2 boys. And what we are now doing with Jai Vakil is that we are actually wanting to train more and more individuals. So we have a program, an internship program, where we ask them to send 1 or 2 individuals, every 3 months. And we sensitize our staff, we train them, we put visual schedules, we give them breaks, we give them those quiet, corners where if they get overwhelmed. And we give them experience certificates after the end of 3 months or 6 months, so that when they actually go out for employment, they feel more empowered. Even the employer feels more empowered because they have, had this experience and this experience letter from us. And we personally, reach out to the employer and, kind of even empower them to, accept, so that's what we do. And I think my team has become more, I think they've really understood how to make more deeper connections. And they have understood that inclusion is not charity, but it is, strength for the organization. And I think my organization has become a more inclusive, diverse, and a more happy space because we integrate them in all our festivities, whether it is any celebration of Diwali, cake, birthday celebrations, Independence Day celebrations. So we kind of unite them, and we really feel them, their families are so, so happy. And that's, I think, progress for any company.
Definitely. I think individuals like you are teaching the world who has become so mechanical to get back the human touch. So a beautiful, beautiful initiative that you have taken. So keep doing the fantastic work that you all are doing. So ma'am, as for you, what are the behavioral patterns in children on the autism spectrum that should be addressed early?
Okay, so Dolly, in my opinion, I think early emotional expression is the pattern that one must address early. Behaviors like head banging, hitting, biting, pushing, all of these are forms of communication. Okay. When we give them some medium of expression, some medium where they can express their emotions, their feelings, behavior reduces. If parents, teachers, or therapists don't address these forms of communication, these forms of behavior at their root, behaviors escalate.
Correct.
Okay. So early intervention can include giving them an accessible form of communication, accessible form of expression to help us understand how they feel. Supporting child with sensory needs, building shared moments of focus and bonding with caregivers and therapists. So basically, when a child feels safe, behavior automatically reduces.
So as per you, how important is parent emotional regulation, and how can parents achieve this or build it for that matter?
So, child borrows emotion regulation from parents. If a parent is anxious, the child will mirror it. If a parent is calm, the child will learn calm. So, as we all have heard that a child catches more information and learns more from the parent's actions, what he sees, than what he's being told to do.
Correct.
So, if a parent is abusive, is lying, is hitting, engaging in any kind of these behaviors, child will copy it. Emotionally regulated parent, a well-balanced environment is very essential for a calm and composed child.
So pretty much a child's progress depends on the well-being and the emotional well-being of the parents.
Absolutely. So parents, with regards to your question of how parents can build it, They can start off with having visual routines, visual supports in place, reduce extra amount of chaos and noise in the house, following by giving them a predictable routine that they can follow. That will help the child to be emotionally sound and regulated.
So many parents struggle with guilt and self blame. So, how do you think that this pattern can be broken?
So basically, one thing that I have noticed is whenever any child is diagnosed with any kind of mental issues, the very first thing parents engage in is blame games and deep self-doubt, which can make things worse for the child, not only for the child, but also between them. There is no single definite cause of such issues. What I ask them to do is, whatever it is, accept it with gratitude. Okay? You are not failing, you are learning. Moving on to your second point of guilt. Guilt, how does guilt come? A very basic example. Let's say if I get to know that some other parent is doing something extraordinary with your kids, something more than what I am providing, I will feel guilty. So guilt comes from comparison. Guilt comes from having unrealistic goals, unrealistic expectations from the child. You know, and this guilt reduces when we focus on progress rather than perfection. Even a 5% progress is an achievement. Cherish it. One sentence I always ask parents to repeat: I am doing the best I can with what I know, and I'm learning every day.
So, ma'am did speak about burnout. So, what are those burnout signs that are overlooked in mothers?
Okay, so usually people think that burnout is when mother expresses anger, disappointment, frustration, guilt, and so on. But actually, it is when she stops feeling all of this. It is emotional numbness, when she stops feeling happiness, excitement, or even sadness for that matter. Shutting down emotionally is a silent alarm.
Wow, this is, even I was of the opinion that, yeah, you're shouting, maybe you're just disconnecting, is what I thought is the way of expressing burnout. But this was something new. Ma'am, you have been there, done that. So, if you could explain us what is burnout and how did you deal with it?
I feel it's very challenging for especially mothers of neurodiverse children. It is really tough. It's a lot of work, and we all love our kids, but the fact remains that at some point you do burn out because we never want to give up on our children. We have this perception of this perfect child, which is a very, which the society has put in our minds. Firstly, a perfect child, do well academically, disciplined, everything. But which we are carrying on since generations and generations. So it's not really the fault of the mothers. So we are really burdened with so much expectations of our parents, our spouses, society, ourselves for our children. So I feel really sad that, we are overburdening the children. So in that whole rut of our and other expectations, we are constantly running to make them perfect, to fit in the society. And in that entire process, what we do burn out because we don't take care of ourselves, we don't take care of our emotions, and we are not kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I feel that shows, finally it does show on the child.
Correct.
Because, patience is the key. So children with neurodiversity, they take a lot of time and patience, to develop. And they develop beautifully. But the more we are frustrated, the more we are disappointed, because burnout comes, those are the outcomes of burnout. Emotionally we get low. You see a lot of depression happening with mothers, with kids with neurodiversity. we become frustrated, intolerant, and our relationships with people around us suffer. So, and then we get very upset with the child. So we need to realize that we do not need to burn out. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to have that self-care routine, because I did burn out after 3 years of working with Dave. You can imagine, like 3 years of no break, because I know people get shocked, even the parents, it is very unbelievable, but it's true. But that was and I thought that was my love for him, but I don't suggest and recommend this to any mother to do something so hardcore, because I feel when I started taking care of myself after those 3 years and started giving myself that time and accepting the way things are going and being more patient, I actually saw the real progress, happening with Dave. And I think our family was more calmer, more happier, especially to the mothers of, kids who have like siblings and who are neurotypical. I think they really suffer a lot. I have seen that in my own family, and I would really, suggest, and what I could, this could be a takeaway from the podcast, that, you have to really take care of your family, you take care of yourself, and be very empathetic towards the other sibling, because, we do not want the other child having emotional dysregulation, which could become worse than having a child with any neurodiverse, issues, because that gets very difficult to handle later.
So, ma'am, you have been Dave's therapist since the past 7 years. If you could explain us the journey.
I have seen all of it.
That's all.
All of it. And he's come out so beautifully well. As she said, that he's running marathons. He's working so well with paintings. He keeps up his exhibitions, and many more to come. So I do behavior modification for him. I do, different parts of ADLs. I do very structured activity with regards to cognition, social skills, and so on. And Dave is showing great results every time. He amazes me sometimes with his answers. I'm like, okay, that's beyond my imagination that I could predict.
Correct.
That. So
I would also like to here I'll say that
come to you, ma'am. She has been providing, but you are the one who is experiencing. So I would love to know your experience as well.
Shrita's been like a constant force or person in Dev's life, very integral person, and very consistent. So he's very comfortable. And what is important is a very important thing I would like to add a point to what Shrita said, is that Dev suffered a big communication loss. So from a child, from being a child who was speaking in sentences, post regression, he came down to no words at all. He became a child who would not even say a word. So that was the most difficult, challenge we have faced. And we had to literally work from ground zero. And, we had to build his communication, which is what we did along with the Glendorman program with Shrita, with, the family. So a holistic approach. So we are seeing a lot of communication, which reduced frustration in him, because non-verbal children really struggle with a lot of more behaviors. So it's very important for parents to work on the communication of the child, whether in today we have so many things and available, and at that point of time, so many years back, we did not have what we have today in India. But so communication really came up, and with that, his self-esteem came. So, yes. With Shrita, I think she taught us to, to accept things with more understanding than frustration. And she doesn't only work on Dave's skills, but she works with the entire staff of the house, be it the cook, the domestic workers, the drivers, the trainers. So for them to understand Dave's needs better and also create a more nurturing environment in the house. So she helps with everyone who is involved in Dave's daily routine, and she also makes Dave's daily routine more meaningful and more structured, and trains everyone how to better understand him, better making the learning environment more conducive, whether it's in the house, whether he goes out with them, whether he goes for movies with them. So it really takes off the load from me. So and he connects with different people when they socialize. He's not only connected to the mother. He can go out today and have a lunch with even his helpers, even with his drivers, even with his trainers, even with different people around him, which is very extremely important. I think the mothers have to learn to let go. I think that is the biggest lesson, because when you let go and expose the child and give that responsibility to the child to learn with other people and interact with other people, is the biggest gift you're giving your child. Because what do we all want? We want our children to live independently without us. But then what do? We do not want them to let go. I think the biggest gift the mother can give the child is letting them be and giving their space. So true. So, for them to be able to live a life when, she or the spouse is not around. The father and the mother is not around.
True.
Yeah.
True. Also, Miss Priya has given him exposure to so many different places, so many different social settings, which is very essential. True. So what parents do is, oh, I can't take him to the theater because he will shout. I can't take him to the restaurant because he will snatch food. I can't take him here. I can't take him there. I take him every possible place that I can. Every possible place. We started off with his sitting tolerance being just 5 minutes. Now we take him to theaters to watch movies, and his sitting tolerance is 2.5 hours, 3 hours also when he's there.
Perfect. I want to touch upon the sensory needs, because the thing is, a lot of parents are completely depending on the Otis sessions like twice a week. It's not going to help. They will only give you strategies. You need to implement that at home and outside. So, for example, if a child has sensory needs and he's very sensitive to sound, so that doesn't mean you keep your child away from sound for the rest of his life and he cannot enjoy the social activities or, other connections. You should expose him to that gradually, little by little, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So that's what we did. We were told by the therapist, don't expose him to sound, don't expose him to dark, don't expose him to this. But I said, no, that's not going to be the way I'm going to work. I said, I want my son to enjoy everything. I do not want to think. I can't go to a family event because my son can't take noise. No, if we are adapting to him, he should also adapt. It has to work both ways. So we started taking him to these shows. Initially, he ran out, but we never gave up. We said, it's okay. And we had to work on ourselves for that. First thing is we have to drop that thing of, oh, what will that person think? It's so embarrassing. Your child has to be the center, and you have to see, this is good for my child. At that point of time, when you are looking at people, when there are perceptions, you have to think, who I care about, whom I love about, what is important? My child. So I'm going to do that, because you're not going to ever meet that other person. And even if you meet, it's fine. You are making the standard, the life more easier for your child. You cannot keep them in closed doors all the time. So that shift has to be there,
So perfect approach that you both have taken up. So it's a perfect match, huh? Both of you, for sure. So now that we spoke about your experience, out of this, I just, could focus on that thing called consistency. I did understand that it is very important. You don't leave something just because it is not working. You have to be consistent. So just give us an idea how important is consistency versus intensity in therapy.
I would 100% go with consistency. Okay. Doing small tasks, doing therapy only for 25 to 30 minutes a day is more helpful than doing 3 hours a week. You know, child learn best when things are consistent, small, repetitive. Now, you get to see like huge results with it.
So children have behavior problems. So how do you identify that this behavior problem is because of a communication need or is it something else?
You have to ask yourself one question. Is the child doing this because he or she cannot express it any other way? If once his needs are met, like communication, sensory need, or hunger, and he stops the behavior, it was communication, not a misbehavior.
Ma'am, you definitely must have gone through this. So how did you identify then? How did you deal with that?
I feel a lot of behaviors are the result of inability of communication. I feel that's what I feel. Kids are not able to express themselves and they have a lot of needs, and when their needs are not met, there is a huge gap and they really don't know what to do. That causes frustration, and the frustration causes the behavior. So literally identifying that is extremely important. And I have seen this in Dave a lot, that when we, when he was not able to express, his behaviors were a lot. When he was not able to sleep, his behaviors were a lot. So when the kids are not able to communicate, when they are not able to sleep well, and when they do not have a structure, the behaviors will come up. When we started working on all these things, sleep, communication, and communication with a lot of visuals, because kids on the autism spectrum are very visual learners.
Yeah.
They do, these behaviors start settling down. A very important thing I want to make a point is we do not inform the children enough. Okay, what comes next? Imagine, Dolly, if I'm taking you somewhere right now, we'll finish the show and I'll say, okay, let's step into my car, jump into my car. First question you'll ask me is, where are we going? How much time will we take? I have another meeting. I need to get back at this time. What kind of food there is, if you're going for lunch. But we do not inform them anything. We say, okay, let's go here. And then their mind starts acting up. Where are we going? Where am I going? How much time is it going to take? What is going to happen? What is the environment there? So we do not feed them that information. So when we start doing that, we automatically see that they are in peace. They know what's going to happen. They know what's going to finish. What is the environment there? And they enjoy it, and you enjoy, and you just come back. So that's the way their brain works. It's just a difference.
Correct.
And we give them what they need. We see that the behaviors come down. Otherwise, the behavior can become a learned behavior, and the child can keep repeating that behavior of, say, crying or any kind of, dysregulation. But I highly believe, we can work on it at any age.
And adding on to her point, that is exactly where visual schedule works, giving them a predictability of what's next, what is going to come next, where am I going, how am I going, and so on. It helps them, really calm and settle down. Yeah.
And also giving them the choices. So they can't just be doing what we want them to do. So I feel we give him, even today, Dave does sports every day. So we give him a choice. Do you want to skate today? Do you want to run in the race course? Do you want to swim? So we have these cards and he chooses. And when they make their choices, they feel more empowered. What they want to eat.
More connected.
Yeah. So then they feel they are in control. Otherwise, they always feel we are controlling them.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to stop doing that. We need to let them take the charge of their life and control of their life. And they'll just become more happier.
So that's what makes it a little more easier when I say that we need to understand their behavior pattern rather than, controlling their behaviors.
We need to undo a lot of things. We need to unlearn, undo ourselves. We always want to fix them and make them do. Which now I feel what I am doing in my advocacy is reverse the way you are doing things. So you can't expect them to adapt always. You need to start adapting. True to that.
And I love that point of choices. Who likes being imposed?
All the time.
Yeah.
We're doing that all the time. Imagine.
Even if our therapy is like really, really structured, I give them choices. Okay, you want to do this, you want to do that. You want to do typing, you want to do so and so activity. He makes a choice. So he feels I am heard, I am understood.
Yeah.
And my decisions matter. My decisions matter.
That's where the confidence builds.
Yes.
So you have been given a title of Mrs. Beyond Feminism. So what does that title mean to you?
Mrs. Beyond Feminism for me means going beyond boundaries. I think feminism has got women their rights, and I completely respect that. But the kind of work which I do today, which revolves around advocacy, neurodiversity, human dignity, fatherhood beyond boundaries. So it is about women who do work beyond perceived limits. They do work which men do, and they do beautifully well, very powerfully. And, it's a very integrated approach. So beyond feminism for me means doing things and tasks which is beyond boundaries and beyond our own perception as women.
Wow. And truly the title has been given to you because you have been doing wonders.
So basically, I am in a very male-dominated industry. Like even today, the fire and security industry is dominated by around 95% men. And I did step into that. So a big part was that. And I'm also a single parent to two beautiful kids. They're twins. And, I feel holding the family together, being the mother and the father of a family, and also being into an industry did ignite more male energy. So when I actually did this pageant, it was after so many years, well, I actually got into my female energy and I felt so good about it because we really don't need to lose that. When we do work which, our men do, we do not need to lose that energy because I feel female energy is so beautiful and, we are natural nurturers and multitaskers.
Yes.
Which men are not. So, yes, so this title holds a lot for me.
So, ma'am, we'll do a bit of time travel. Suppose we go back to that day when Dev was diagnosed, to the journey, throughout the journey, and where you are now. So, what has the learning been? And there must be guilt, or there must have been moments that you felt low. And now, what do you feel? And how has this helped you to develop yourself?
If I go back in time, so many years back when he was diagnosed, it was, firstly, it was very difficult to accept. It took me like 2 years to accept. And I was like, I could not say depression, but I was extremely low. Maybe it could be a slight depression. Then I had to get myself together. When I got myself together and focused on, education and empowerment, I think things shifted. And fast forward to so many years of hours in therapy and hospital visits, traveling to the US for the treatment, working on communication and everything in the world, I think it has transformed me completely 360 degrees. In fact, in the whole process, I feel I have learned so much. Dev has definitely learned and grown. But along with that, the entire family has learned so much, grown so much. And I feel like whatever I am today, I'm sitting in front of you, confident, ready to take on any challenges, is only because of my years of journey with Dev and the learning. So he's been a true blessing. And I wouldn't have it any other way. If you would ask me that, say in your next life, would you want a child with autism? I said, yeah, every life I would want, because I feel the connection you feel with these kids is so pure and genuine. And they really teach you unconditional love and what true connection is. There's no expectation, no deadline. So I think I am very happy, and I have no regrets. I have no guilt, and I'm just enjoying my son more than anything in the world.
Wow, this gave me goosebumps to be. Wow. Coming from this kind of a thing, emotion coming in from a mother, gives so much hope to other mothers. Wow.
I truly say that if you have a child with autism in your family, you're truly blessed. The family is truly blessed. And I think we need to just enjoy instead of constantly having goals and schools and all that stuff. Just enjoy this gift in your life.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Coming back to you, ma'am. So you have worked in school setups as well as in hospital setups. So a striking difference, or how is your approach been?
Yeah. So basically, schools and hospital, both of them are really different, setups. In hospital, goals, therapies are more personalized. They are focused on skill building. Whereas in school, it's more generalized, and you take up those skills, generalize it forward through experiences, through experiential learning, through schedules, and so on. So, where hospital is the building blocks of these skills, school takes it forward, takes this legacy forward into applying these skills into real life situations.
Also, this one thing that all parents must have gone through when you are, into the society, probably a theater or maybe a mall or anywhere that you take your children. Those eyes, those looks, those judgments, all parents must have gone through. How do you deal with those? And what do you want to say to people who are giving these looks, for that matter?
So, definitely that exists. Judgment does exist. Perceptions do exist. I don't know. I think I've been pretty lucky. I have not been told anything directly, but I get a lot of parents come, and tell me that, their experiences. But although I have not been told things directly, but I can definitely see in the facial expressions, in the body language, that there are perceptions, there are judgments all the time. And I would not say they do not bother. We are all humans. We are all emotional. They do bother. Even till date, they do bother. Yeah. Initially, they bothered a lot. Then, it became better, lesser. And with time, you have to train yourself. It's a very, very consistent training that the mothers have to do them to themselves. Like, okay, judgment is going to be there any which way. For me, for you, for her, for everybody. For even my neurotypical child, there is going to be judgment. There are going to be perceptions. But I chose, education, empowerment over, judgment and validations. And I focused on that. And I just focused on my child. So it's taken a very long time. It's taken a lot of practice. But I think I'm at that, state today that, even if there are judgments and looks, I just don't let it. I just filter them out.
Wow. Perfect. That is a perfect thing to do.
Fortunately, because if you keep bothering about judgments, you are not going to make any progress with yourself and your child. We have to have a single pointed progress and goal that is your child, and that's it.
So in regards to the same thing, ma'am, you did mention that you take children out for the teaching and learning. So definitely you must have also experienced the same. So how do you deal with
Absolutely, absolutely. So I go out with every client of mine very confidently. I don't care about what people are thinking. Oh, she's drinking from a cup. Oh, he's not supposed to eat like that, and so on. He's eating with noodles. He's eating noodles with hands, etc., etc. It's fine. Your child just needs exposure. Inclusivity is not only having a slope for wheelchairs. No, no. Inclusivity is not that. Inclusivity is actually when you have your child in the classroom setup. If he is not able to understand uppercase letters, stop focusing on uppercase letters. Give him something that's in lowercase letters. Increase the font size. You know. So just to share an experience, we had an episode wherein I was with Dave and he was wanting to eat macaroon, and we were at a cafe. He was very swift. He went and he grabbed one macaroon in no time while I was removing money for making a payment. I apologized them and I said, I'm sorry, if you want, I can get you another one on his behalf. Now, that was his way of communicating that I want macaroon to eat or I want this to eat. So, when the society understands their needs, empathizes with them, the progress happens, you know. That is how, as she mentioned, that it's not only others who are learning. It's always like a joint venture between kids learning some things, kids learning some behavior. Others also in the society, in his or her environment, learn the same thing.
True.
You know?
That will only happen when mothers and fathers take their kids out different environments. If they keep them hiding at home, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
True. Because people need to see that a lot for them it to be normalized. Like in the US, it is. But in India, we do not. So we need to do for societal judgment.
Because yes, I think the neurodiverse have had loads of information. I think it's time for neurotypicals now to learn all of this and make a true inclusive society.
Also, adding on to your point, if we just give neurodivergent kids a bookish knowledge of where, okay, money concept is 5 plus 10 or money concept is just having 2 notes, where is he going to use? Nowhere. Unless and until he's exposed to real life setting, actually making some transaction, buying food items, tearing, eating, all of this is like very small steps coming together. Just like you and me, WhatsApp is opening, unlocking our phone and just messaging someone. But for them is entering the password. For them is finding out, scanning where WhatsApp icon is. Opening the WhatsApp, finding whom they want to chat with, opening that person's chat, find out letters, words, send that message across. It's like slowly small steps that they have to follow to the conclusion, a result, end result.
Good. So, ma'am, what is that one myth you would like to bust about autism?
The only one myth which I would like to bust about autism is that individuals with autism are limited. There is no limitation. There is only a difference. I would like to tell the world that individuals with autism are highly talented. They're highly gifted. They're highly creative. And if the world gives them acceptance and, gives them the same opportunities which we neurotypical people get, I think the results will be phenomenal. We have seen so many stories of individuals and children with autism being great musicians, artists, athletes. And why does it always happen in the West? Because, the Western culture and society has, shown that acceptance towards them and gives them those opportunities, be it schools, workspaces, communities. If we follow that path, in countries, more countries which are maybe third world countries to second world countries, and because those are the success pathways. We've already seen success. I think our country and our economy will grow because we will have so much of workforce coming in. Our GDP will grow. I think governments, lawmakers, politicians, schools, communities need to realize that potential. And if we tap on that, you will be amazed with what success we as communities and societies and country will make.
So put in on point perfectly.
If we have at least 1 or 2% of neurodiverse individuals in each and every organization, you cannot believe the amount of people we will be helping and the families we will be helping, and we will get really loyal, long-time employees, very sincere workers, very loyal, very committed, and they are not they don't get distracted. Today we are on our phones, scrolling, social media, we are into so many other 10 things, but their focus is very single pointed. So they can really be great assets to the company, So I wish we have this kind of a law by the government where at least every organization recruits 1 or 2 neurodiverse individual. I think we can really progress, much faster. And, the organization themselves, it's a very feel-good factor.
True.
And a lot of employees in the organization, they learn what a human connection is because now they're only connecting with their phones. When they get this exposure and the opportunity, they will really understand, which will help them in their own, growth and connections with their own families.
So.
Because there is no expectation. It's just your feeling. Giving all in. You feel so good when a neurodiverse individual is working, because they do not expect anything in return. They just serve you so beautifully and all.
So purely, so truly.
Yeah. Innocence. Yeah. Because innocence is lost today. True. So when you see that innocence, it's a very feel-good factor.
So, ma'am, how much do you think that a child's progress depends upon the family environment, how it is?
I think it's approximately 75 to 80%, because therapy is just 1 hour a day, but the remaining 23 hours is home. So family environment makes a huge difference into a child's building, a child's growth. So happy and healthy environment leads to a calm and composed child. Okay, when the child feels he is understood, felt, he is progress, he's heard, the progress automatically increases. Also, child needs your patience, your love, your support more than any other luxury that you wish to provide the child. The child just looks forward to these basic requirements. Yeah. And, once those needs are met, progress happens, behavior reduces, behavior stabilizes. So, a child needs parents' time and involvement rather than any other luxury that, they wish to provide to the child. And a perfect example is sitting right in front of us, Miss Priya. She has a very balanced approach when it comes to, providing different things today, providing him with different potentials, different abilities that he can flourish.
Ma'am, she has given her professional expertise, as we know. What do you think? How much of the home environment, influences the child's development?
I feel 100%. The family environment is extremely important in the child's progress and growth. And it is true for each one of us. This is why a child with neurodiversity. I feel if the environment is very calm, it's very nurturing, it's not loud, it's easy, it's flexible, there is a lot of love. I feel the child goes into a very emotionally strong adult, and those initial years are very important. So for the same, I come back to my earlier point that we need to be emotionally regulated. Today, the biggest challenge is to be emotionally regulated for anybody. We get triggered with the smallest of things. So we need to learn to be emotionally regulated and at peace with ourselves. And, for us to even see that progress in our children, So it's, I feel the key is, again, stillness and being present in the moment and not getting triggered with anything which is happening around us, which is very difficult. It is, again, consistent practice. Today it's very hard to be in peace with yourself and be happy. That's because we need to want to do a lot of things. And if we slow down, I think slowing down is a key word. Yes, for, if we slow down and we reduce the expectations from our children and focus on, doing small things, small baby steps and baby progress. And I think you'll be in the right direction, and that keeps you happy and grounded.
Adding on to a point, that is how therapy works. Therapy, parents should not get involved into complex strategies of therapy. Start with basics. Start with having visual schedules in place, communication in place with regards to AAC, gestures, sign language, whatever, simple words also for that matter. And that creates a shift.
So exposing here Dave to a lot of activities and then figuring out what is the best skill.
Yes.
So at least
Involving herself with Dave in all these things, that matters the most.
We must be having like 7 groups for Dave. One is a physical group, one is a group where we are cognitive learning, one is a school group, and one is a home support group. So everybody is involved. And when you feel you have support, then it's really relaxed. And we have a house group also with our drivers and our cooks that we keep telling them, okay, they keep informing, he's not eating dinner. I was like, okay, fine, ask him what he wants. So we're like,
And we work as a team. We don't work as driver will do his work and go. Helper will do his work and go. She will do more work and go. I will do my work and go. No. We act as a team. Integrative approach to the whole progress. So
as they rightfully say, every person in the child's life has to be involved. So even my driver today, I can send him for a drive with Dave. I will not bore. He knows how to deal. So we need to, and I feel that mothers can't burden themselves, and you should not take that burden. It is not your job to take that burden all by yourself. With burden, I mean to say is it's self-inflicted burden. Like, you can very well, structure the day in such a way that Dave is, someone else is responsible, because actually you are not burdening that person. You are actually doing good to that person. That person is learning, and everybody loves these children. Contrary to what we think.
Definitely.
So let them mess up and let them create a scene, doesn't matter.
Because don't you think even they get bored with one person probably? So they get exposure to so many. They even understand different patterns, different people, different environments, which is very important. Otherwise, how will they understand the worldly setups? So yeah, definitely. In fact, I just loved when y'all did discuss that our entire house, even the house helps, have been informed, so they can really give in, and the space that they will be working from once they are informed will be completely different. So amazing kind of a step that you all have taken. Is beautiful. So we always speak about therapies, which therapy needs to be given, it's working, this and that. My question to you is, what is that red flag when therapy is not working?
Okay. So, when a therapist is aligned with a child's needs, there are very less chances that therapy might not work. Still, in some cases, there are chances, there are some red flags. First of which could be when the child comes to your space scared, or nervous, or comes into your session crying, already crying, that is the first red flag. The second red flag is when the child is not showing any progress for consecutive 3 to 4 months. Progress need not be like 100% progress in any one skill. No, progress could be small, 5% progress, 2% progress, not only in one single domain, but in any domain with regards to cognition, with regards to emotion regulation, with regards to anything in and around. So that is the second red flag. And third red flag is when parents and caregivers are not involved in the therapy process. When they feel left out, that is another thing, that the child's progress stops because parents are not involved. They are, in their own work, in their own hustle bustle. And the child like, oh, I have to go and come back. There's no link, there's no connection between them. So that is the third red flag. I also firmly believe that when a therapist is skilled, truly understand needs of the child, and teams up well with the parents, these red flags can be eliminated.
So, ma'am, in regards to schools, inclusion, shadow teachers, a lot of other laws that have been put in that no child can be denied admission. As per you, do you think all of this is in place or it needs some change?
I do not think all of this is in place. Maybe some of it, and in very minimalistic schools. We all know about the Right to Education Act and what it mentions. It clearly mentions that no child can be denied education or access, and all the schools have to be able to service children with diversity.
Correct.
Okay, and they cannot be refused, and they have to give that kind of a structure, and the teachers have to be trained with for diversity. But that is clearly not happening. Whether in schools which are very elite, also the IB schools, where actually parents are paying lakhs and lakhs of rupees, and also it's not happening there as well, because they are only focusing on their rigorous academic curriculums, and they only want to rank the top and outperform the other schools. And education is a big business, as everybody knows. But going back to inclusivity, it is definitely a far-fetched dream. Of course, things are happening, and in certain schools they must be, I'm sure they must be doing great work. But in all, we are not even close to that dream of inclusiveness, or Right to Education Act is not being executed, in most of the schools. So we are, also India being such a big country with the number one population in the world, that means the disability ratio, you can see, it is very high. And it's not impossible, it is very possible, but the schools are not putting that effort. I think we are just sitting on a time bomb when we will realize that, we should have done that. Governments will realize that, they should have taken this step. For integration, because it's clearly we are in a good space where,
I do understand our conversations can go on for sure, because we have so much within ourselves that we want to discuss, but we have our own time constraints, unfortunately. So that one message that you would love to give to our audience, ma'am, and you as well, ma'am. So we start with you.
So I understand that it's a highly competitive world outside. But in this whole competition, I don't want parents to rush as if they want to achieve something, achieve a big goal. Because all kids, especially neurodivergent kids, progress at their own pace, learn at their own pace. I don't want parents to ask kids to produce something on demand. Huh? Stop treating them like a machine that they need to show up when they're demanded for. They can go slow at their pace. Just like बहुत common example है, everyone might have heard dal makhni slow cooking process, you know. If I pressure cook it, the taste will really change as compared to the 12-hour long dal makhni cooking process.
Okay.
So that is how we should, consider that. Not rushing them to achieve a goal. You are exactly the parent that they need. All of us are learning. They are learning. We are learning together as a team.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that powerful message. Over to you, ma'am.
The only message I would like to give is very simple. Celebrate autism.
Wow.
Autism, don't look at it as a disability. Look at it as a difference, a different way of thinking, a different way of perceiving, a different way of communicating. And if we actually take that approach, I think autism will become a big celebration. True. So love your kids. I know everybody loves their kids. Celebrate your kids now. We have loved our kids long enough. We start celebrating them now. And if we celebrate them, I think our lives will become a big bundle of joy and celebration.
So thank you so much, both of you, for your powerful messages that you all have given us today, and lots that parents can take back, and a lot of things that our parents can learn from you. So thank you so much for all your valuable information today.
Thank you, really, for having me in this show and, highlighting Dave's story in front of your beautiful audience.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dolly. I'm grateful to be a part of this show.